No, 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 no. Maybe I should get the fire extinguisher? It's probably fine. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this acrylic phone and GPS mount for my car. There's going to be lots of measuring, a ton of laser cutting, some good old phone routing, some bootloader modification, and of course quite a few mistakes along the way. Before I get into that, the first thing I wanted to address was my work mat that I have on my workbench, and I'm going to be making more videos, so the print on my existing tech mat would be disapprovingly looked down upon by the YouTube gods. So I figured I might as well just personalize it, customize it, and make it my own anyway. So here I am. This was cumbersome AF to try and stick on this tiny little plate because the mat is so much wider than the printing plate. So I had to get pretty creative with shoving things under it and using a massive amount of packing tape to hold it all down. So I'm trying to make something flexible and not flat and spongy, be as flat as possible to get a good print out of. You can kind of see how I folded it under. Somewhat surprising, the print quality actually came out pretty good. I'm impressed by how well that came out considering how precariously it was mounted in there. The only thing was there's some ghosting on where the clear coat layer kind of shifted off, and I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but you better believe I saved $3 whole by buying a pre-branded one instead of a blank one. I just scraped that off with a knife. These remnants will just blend with the patina of time anyway. Now, getting back into the project, I actually made this quite a few years ago using this Moto G phone. Eventually it died on me even after replacing the battery twice. It would just complain and not turn on, so it's time for an upgrade. You can see the old Moto G on the right here. On the left, I'm going to be retaining the GPS module because that is still thankfully working correctly. Here's the construction. It's just 3mm layers of acrylic cut out and retained with some 5mm bolts. This could be done in a much less complicated way, but it's essentially an acrylic sandwich of components in between the layers. You can see when designing you need to leave room for access to buttons and touch screens and USB ports. This is just some cheap extruded acrylic. I'm very impressed with how well it has held up over the years. Even in the sun on the dashboard it hasn't warped or cracked or anything like that. This is only like $12 of material. I think the mat actually cost more than this did to make. The first step on this journey is just disassembly to extract the old components. You can see there are quite a few layers. The replacement for the old Moto G is going to be a considerable upgrade. It's got a bunch more storage, a bigger and better screen, a Type-C port, more RAM. It's just overall better in almost every way. I bought this on eBay for $85, which isn't the cheapest phone, but for what you get, it is quite a value. I specifically wanted an older Nexus phone because they are some of the most friendly for hacking and modding. The first step in creating this is the least fun part, which is just a whole lot of measuring and plotting, and measuring and measuring, and lots of measuring. And here just roughly mocking up kind of dimensionally where I want things to lay out. The way I think of this is kind of like 2D, 3D printing. So you're cutting the X and Y axis, but the Z axis is actually made up of the layers of material. Your Z axis is confined to the dimensions of your material height. So for this layer, I had to make a decision on what would be a tighter fit using the 1.5 or the 3mm thickness. If it's too tight, it might crack. After a ton of measuring and plotting the points, I was able to make a 2D model of of the new Nexus phone. And from that, I was able to tweak and modify my existing layers to accommodate the new phone with the old GPS. Here are the layers as they are arranged to be cut, and here they are stacked on top of each other like they will be in the final product. There are 6 layers and they are color coded for my own sanity. The lime green layer is just for engraving and not cutting. With everything finally laid out correctly, the only thing left to do is to cut. You could do this by hand with a router or a Dremel and regular cutting tools, but having access to a laser makes this so much easier. I can't imagine how long it would take to cut this by hand, but it would definitely be a lot longer than a laser. With that being said, it still takes about 15 minutes per layer. This footage is sped up 20x. It's a lot of cutting. Lots and lots of cutting. Most of the parts will just fall out, but some of them do need an extra bit of persuasion. Before peeling off the protective layer of all the parts, I wanted to do kind of like a dry fit. Even though I spent all of that time measuring and plotting things in the computer, there's only one way to really find out if it's correct. It appears as if I was successful, so the next step is peeling off all of the protective layers. If you're into satisfying peels, this is the job for you. Under tighter scrutiny, I am not pleased with the outcome. I definitely don't like how that camera hole came out. I'm not pleased with the play in that piece right there. Looks like I messed up measuring the camera bump, and definitely not happy with how the engraving came out. I'm also not pleased with the button cutouts in the front. They're a little too tall for my liking. I would maybe give this like a B-. I'm gonna see if I can fix this without having to recut everything. We'll see how it goes. I don't even need a front camera cutout anyway. I'm not gonna use the camera, plus the acrylic is clear, and I made it look a lot uglier. Also showing you how I'm not pleased with the front. And I also found another problem where trying to use the 90-degree angle, it smashes into that. So that's not gonna work either. It almost fits, but not quite, especially when you plug it in. And yes, I know I can flip it up so that the cord comes up, but I don't want to do that. I'd rather just fix it. You can see all of my blue markings on where I need to make changes. I'm not happy with this gap, and I'm thinking of a way that I can cinch that down. I guess compression is better than having more room. It's rare to get everything perfect on the first go, but I am getting better. The first thing I wanted to fix was the engraving. Before I used extruded acrylic, and it does not engrave nearly as well as cast acrylic. So for this back piece, I'm using cast acrylic. Extruded tends to cut better, while cast tends to engrave better. I also found out that you cannot engrave through the plastic protective layer. You're going to want to take that off before engraving. Let's see how I did this time. I think it came out much better. I could have salvaged the pieces that I already had, but I really wanted to recut the top layer and the bottom layer, so with all of my tweaks done on the computer, I just ended up recutting everything. I'm not going to make you sit through that, so here's just a bunch all squashed together. On one of the pieces that I recut, part of the protective layer was coming up on the edge, and I didn't think that it was going to be a big deal, but it ended up catching on fire, which was kind of alarming. Now it's time to swap from the old prototype to the newly cut pieces. The final piece is nearly perfect. There's only one thing I would tweak, and that is the button cutouts right there. I would have made them maybe 3 or 4 millimeters taller, but it's not enough to recut everything all over again. The engraving came out much better, and I have a lot more room for the USB port now. I also fixed the gap in the phone. It is slightly bowed now, but I would prefer that over it being too loose inside of there. Now let's get into the software setup on the phone. I haven't rooted a phone in a really long time, and I forgot some of the apps and toolkits that I used to use to root phones because I used to do it a lot more. The first app that I tried was like the most recommended Android rooting toolkit. It was this horrible app called Dr. Phone. If you are rooting your phone, do not use that app. It basically took 2.5 hours, and it doesn't show you anything of what's going on in the background. It's just like, yeah, we're rooting your phone, and then 2.5 hours later it like errors out and says, no, sorry, we can't root your phone. Just absolute garbage. Stay away from it. I eventually found the one I used to use, which is a Nexus root toolkit. Using NRT, I was able to flash TeamWin and root it, and everything was great. After rooting, I did the OEM off mode charge hack that allows your device to boot when power is applied to it. Then I install MacroDroid, which is the best automation app, especially with root privileges. And finally, I created and implemented some custom boot images. Now I just have to install it in the car. I previously had my GPS USB cable already routed correctly. Since I'm going from micro to Type-C, I did have to route a new USB cable for the phone, and I was also going to be doing 3.5mm audio connection instead of using Bluetooth. I'll be showing you how I routed the wires and also how I mounted the acrylic to the dashboard. I just used some angled aluminum channel and then drilled 3 holes in that and 3 holes in my dashboard, and then attached everything with some 5mm bolts. and here it is fully installed in the car. It will boot up automatically when you press the ignition. It will run its custom boot images, and then it will automatically start playing music for you. And later when you turn the car off, it'll automatically close all the apps and shut down. I know this project is kind of silly and overkill because most people want to take their phones with them when they leave the car. I just think additional screens in your car is always going to make it a cooler experience. I also come from a time of cassette decks and CD players in your car. So to me, this is just kind of like the updated version of that. This had been working flawlessly for a couple months, and then my GPS started crying about a bad battery, so here I am replacing it. I'm really happy with how this project came out. Every time I go for a drive, I appreciate having my GPS right there in front of me, and also the ability to change songs and have it just play automatically for me is really cool. Of course, you can just go on Amazon and buy a $5 plastic clip that'll hold your phone, and your phone already has GPS. I like having a standalone GPS, even if I know where I'm going. It's just cool to look at it while I'm driving. And it just makes me feel like I'm in the future. I got a bunch of screens in my car that didn't used to be there. So cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to show you how to take any USB keyboard and convert it to Bluetooth wireless. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.